Welcome back to Most Self-Improved, a podcast where we're trying to make changes little by little. Have no fear of being overwhelmed here. We're all for small improvements that lead to a more fulfilling, engaged life. I'm Erin Jensen with my lovely co-host, Bhavana Chilukuri, who's just a little under the weather.
Just a little bit. Hi, everybody. Thank you for bearing with the nasally voice.
Also, when we're super well, why do we not say I'm over the weather? Like, why is that? Why is that not a
We
thing?
should start. Let's make that a thing.
Next episode, Bobs will be over the weather. But for this episode, we're speaking with goal achievement coach Kristin Burke. And boy, is that a title that leads you to believe that she gets stuff done and can fix our life in the length of this podcast, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm counting on anyway.
Kristin is going to help us be more consistent so we can achieve our goals. Bhavana, where would you like to be more consistent in your life besides health, obviously?
That is the number one thing right now, but I don't know. I feel like so many areas. I've kind of been dreading this episode and like,
oh no, that's what you want to hear as your co.
No, I know. I just feel like this is a very hard topic. There's so many suggestions, right? Like accountability buddy. I've definitely lied to an accountability buddy. I've been like, yeah, I did it this week. And I was so embarrassed by the number of weeks in a row I had not done anything. I have lied. So I don't know. I haven't found a solution yet that helps me like do it. So I'm excited to talk to Kristin, but I'm also like, maybe I can't be helped with consistency based on what I have done in the past. But to answer your question, I think the two big areas are exercise always, since forever, which I know you are very good at. You are like very consistent.
Didn't go today. There was a storm. And I was told it was not safe to leave the house.
And then, I don't know, I've always had this thing of, I need to be writing every week or doing something. And sometimes I get it done, but most of the time I do not. So those are kind of two areas where I'd like more, but I hope she has some new creative suggestions for me. So let's see. What about you?
First of all, when you say that you lied to your accountability buddy, am I that buddy and have you lied to us here on the show? It's very important.
No, I have not lied to you. I'm thinking about...
Is that a lie?
I hope she... No, it's not. I am thinking about a writing partner that I had.
Yeah. Why do you think it's so hard to just fess up? And what I also want to get to obviously here, why is it so hard for us just to do what we want to do? And that's one of our questions. We know that we have these goals, whether it be exercise or writing, but what keeps us from doing these things? I'm excited for that answer.
Me too, especially because I'm not a deadbeat. I get all my work done. At work, I complete everything. So why, when I think about my own life, things I actually want to do I let that stuff slip? I'm only letting down myself. So It's annoying, right? So anyways, it's kind of depressing to think about it that way. But we're going to learn. Where would you like more consistency?
I could be a little more consistent in my morning routine, I think. Gratitude, journaling consistently. But where I really needed to show up is with promotion for these podcasts and booking guests for another podcast. It's like I do the full-time job, and if I work out and the baby girl's just tired and the baby girl wants a little bit of a break and she wants a little bit of a social life, I will overwhelm myself and be like, okay, let's devote so many hours to this, when really I'm sure if I devoted just smaller chunks throughout the day consistently, I wouldn't feel so worn out. So that's what I'm hoping to get resolved today. I don't know.
We can do it. We can do it.
I'm glad you have faith.
Help us, Kristin.
Oh my gosh, help us. Let's bring her out behind door number 1. Let's welcome Kristin to the show.
Hi, Kristin. We are so excited to have you here today to talk about consistency. Just to start, we'd love for you to tell us and our audience a little bit about your role as a goal achievement coach, which is a title we love.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show. I am so energized to connect with you both today. So goal achievement coach, it's not like I woke up one day and I'm like, I'm a goal achievement coach. It actually came about in a really unique way. I was doing coaching in the financial services industry for a very long time. And that's where I fell in love with coaching. I was so energized to help financial advisors achieve their goals. And I loved having the coaching conversations. And when I thought about where I ultimately wanted to take my career, I thought it was going to be in higher level leadership in financial services. So I was in leadership development programs. I raised my hand for a new opportunity and I didn't get it. And that was the point where I thought, let me pause and think, what is it that I truly want? What is it I'm truly going after? And I realized the part of the work that I enjoyed the most was coaching and developing business owners. So I thought, well, why don't I go out and do that on my own? And so it was really the wake up calling from the universe that I needed. And I launched my coaching practice in December 2019. And when I launched my coaching practice, I realized I wanted something to differentiate myself from all the other business coaches out there in the marketplace. And my favorite topic to talk about is goals. I was having for years calls with my girlfriends, and they were called goals calls on the calendar. So that's how Goal Achievement Coach was born.
So many things I love about that. We love that question here when you stop and pause and you think, is this what I want to be doing with my life? We love the clarity. And then also, as Bob's is sick of me hearing, all I want is friends who want to talk about goals. So I love this.
Erin loves that.
I love it so much.
Okay, well, let's be friends afterwards.
Yeah. You guys heard it here. Hold her to it. I saw it mentioned a few times on your website, and you just talked about it here, those goals calls with your girlfriends. How do we get clear on what our goals should be?
So I recommend a 4-part process to get extreme clarity on what your goals should be. And I recommend you start with a vision. Now, I'm not the first coach to talk about the power of having a long-term vision, but here's what I think a vision is really going to help you do is it's going to paint the bigger picture for the goals that you're working on today. And I know for a lot of people, coming up with a vision can be really challenging. I hear it all the time. They say, I can't see that far into the future. I'm not sure what I want. And one of the things I wonder, is that true, or is that fear or lack of confidence that's really coming into play? So to start setting your goals, it starts with coming up with your long-term vision. And then I recommend you go through a reflection. There's so much power in the pause, as we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. And when you give yourself that space to pause and reflect, and I offer my clients a lot of intentional reflection questions, you learn so much about your goal achieving behaviors and tendencies. That's going to help you set really meaningful goals in the future. And then the third part of the effective goal setting process is to brainstorm. There are so many different goals we can focus on. And I recommend that you start looking at goals in terms of different pillars that are important for your life. So you might have a professional pillar or a business pillar, a personal pillar, a family, a faith, a fitness. These are different for everyone, but you start thinking about your goals in terms of pillars. And then once you brainstorm all your goals, you start narrowing them down to which are the most meaningful. And that leads you to the fourth part, which is planning. And most people, they can set a goal, but then they don't create a plan. And that's where it gets really challenging, because we might set this really big goal and we're like, yay, I've got a great goal. But if you don't have a plan on how to actually get there, like what are the things you're going to do? What are you willing to give up? What are the strategies you're going to execute to achieve that goal? It could be really difficult for you to achieve your goal. So vision, reflect, brainstorm, and plan. That's going to help you get really clear on your goals.
I love that so much. And just a couple of follow-up questions there. One, when you are reflecting, what are the types of things you should be asking yourself or thinking about?
So I'm going to share with you 2 very simple questions. What do you want more of in life and business? What do you want less of in life and business? I have a ton of other reflection questions that we could talk about, but I think these 2 simplify things so much. And if you sit down with your journal, a cup of tea, cup of coffee, and brainstorm, you're going to be so surprised at what comes out, and you're going to get really clear what you want more of and less of. And then you can start to curate your goals around that.
After the brainstorming, how do we know which goals out of our brainstorm to pick?
And just to follow up on that, I lose myself at that last step, the plan, because I'm like, oh, here's my list of 20 things I'm going to do this week. So how do you think about the prioritization and focus?
Great question. So one thing I think about is if you're newer to goal setting and goal achieving, right? Because a lot of people set goals, but do we achieve the goals? Then I recommend you really simplify and focus on less goals. If you've built up the systems, the processes, the routines, you have a lot of experience doing this, then certainly we might be able to have 20 different goals because they're in different pillars and you're not going to achieve them all in a certain quarter. Like you might have some Q1 goals or Q2 goals, etc. But one thing, yes, to your point, you might go off of a gut feeling. And as you brainstorm, there might be one that's glaringly obvious. But I find that's not true for most people. They're like, all these goals are important. I want to achieve them all. So I love this. You can use a very simple ranking system and rank your goals 1 to 5. 1 being not that meaningful, 5 being most meaningful. And when you go through and you start ranking them, you're going to have some 5s start to bubble up, and you're going to have some things that are like maybe 3s, and we'll consider them for the future, but those 5s then really start to become clear on what's energizing. And then I want to remind you too, if you have that vision, you go back to your vision and you start thinking, what's the goal that's going to get me to this vision the fastest, or that's going to move me in the direction of the vision? Because we might have 20 goals, but if they're not related to that vision, then we're going to have a hard time achieving that vision.
Kristen, I'm loving this already. Also because Bhavana and I are in need, right? That's why we chatted with you. So I like to be reminded that I'm as young as possible anytime I can. So I think Bhavana and I are goal babies. Should we call ourselves that? We're goal babies. I think that's what we should be excited about. But okay, so these people you mentioned that are great at setting a goal and achieving it, not goal babies, what are they doing? What are the characteristics that they have in common?
It's a great question. I found that there are 4 characteristics of goal achievers. Goal achievers have clarity, confidence, courage, and consistency. And I've named this the 4 C's of goal achievers. Everyone loves a good alliteration, right? So when we break this down, we talked a lot about clarity. So we've talked about effective goal setting, but clarity is when you know what you want and why you want it. So one of the challenges that goal setters sometimes face is they set a goal because they think they should, or someone else told them that they should. Sometimes you achieve those, more often you don't achieve those. So the important part of clarity is really having that meaning, that connection, and going back to the effective goal setting. That's why you have a vision. That's why you do the reflection. That's why you do the brainstorm. So you really have a process to set these clear goals. All right, let's talk about confidence. And confidence on the goal achievement journey is when who you think you are aligns with action to achieve your goals. One of the things that we mess up on as it relates to confidence is we sometimes wait until we're perfectly confident to take that action. But confidence is built when we take action. So we have to get okay with not having all the answers or not being fully ready. We have to recognize we are going to grow that confidence as we are going on our goal achievement journey. And then we talk about courage. And courage is when you embrace discomfort to grow in the direction of your goals. So here's another place where we mess up. We want that fear to be totally gone. But what happens when you start to party with fear, as I say? And when I talk about partying with fear, it's when you're experiencing fear, you're actually growing, you're taking risk. And that is something to celebrate. And when you party with fear, you also start to desensitize yourself to fear, because the more that we are exposed to that fear, we become less fearful of it, right? And how often have you both thought of something you're really afraid of as it relates to your goals, and then you go do the thing, it ends up not being nearly as fearful as you thought it was, as you thought it would be. And then the last C is consistency, which is where we repeat the actions, the habits, and the behaviors that lead to goal achievement.
Amazing. We wanted to focus on consistency today, but what you said about confidence and courage, I don't want to skip over that. I think something that hit me is the confidence. You can't expect it to come before it happens as you're doing it. And I'd love for you to talk a bit more about why did you choose the phrase party with fear? What does that look like? And what does that really mean when you're practicing it?
Yeah, that's such a fun way to think of fear, because when was the last time you thought of fear in a positive way? More often than not, fear is so paralyzing to us on our goal achievement journeys. And one of the ways that I've heard fear described, this is not my own, I've heard this and don't remember where, but it's false expectations appearing real. And so if we start to think about partying with fear, most people like to go to a party. They have a good time at a party. Like, parties are great. We're celebrating at parties. Let's bring that same concept to fear, so that way we're less resistant to it. We start to embrace it more often.
And I also like that one of the C's is not competency, because like you said, you will figure it out if you are courageous and confident enough to move forward.
Let's talk a little bit about consistency because, as you said, as you are building your confidence, trying to figure out how to party with fear, you actually also have to do the thing every week, repetitively. And that helps you, it feels like, get the other too. It feels like it's not a linear thing. It's like they all reinforce each other, if I'm understanding correctly. So how do you define consistency? Why is it so important?
I'm so glad you point out how all the 4 C's work together, because you're absolutely spot on. They support one another, right? The clearer you are with your goal and why it's important, the more courageous you're going to be. The more courageous you are, the more your confidence grows, the more you're feeling good about what you're doing, the more consistent you're going to be. So they all they play into one another. And so as it relates to consistency, here's why it's so important. So many of us will do the thing and we'll do it for 1, 2, a week time and don't get a result and we stop doing the thing. So I was having this conversation with another business owner and we were just talking about lead generation and we're talking about kind of cold outreach. And what I love about LinkedIn is there's literally no limit to people we can connect with and reach out to. And she was like, oh, I just probably haven't done it enough. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. We don't get that immediate result because in our world today, we want this instant gratification. We're used to Amazon delivering same day or next day, right? Grubhub will show up with our meals. So we're so used to this instant gratification, and that's not the way it works as it relates to achieving our goals. So with consistency, we have to start to recognize that we need to probably do more of whatever the inputs are that we need to achieve our goal. And it becomes challenging because of some of our beliefs. And so that's why in my definition, it's repeating not only the actions, but it's the beliefs and the habits that are going to lead to goal achievement. And so some of the things that will derail our consistency, all or nothing thinking. And so I think a great way to think about this is let's go to the first of the year. So many people will set workout goals for the first of the year, right? And gyms are super busy the first of the year, and then they're not. Because probably what happens is you're like, this is the year I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to drink my water. I'm going to stretch. I'm going to read. And you just have all these crazy expectations for yourself. You do it one day, you skip one the next day, and you're like, forget it. The year's like a wash. So we have to ditch that all or nothing thinking and really learn to embrace progress, not perfection. And that will help us start to become more consistent.
I love that. And that was nice of you to read an excerpt from Bhavana and I, our joint diary online of we're going to do all the things. We can't wait to do all the things. That's what we did.
Well, we all do that to ourselves, right? We're like, I'm not super satisfied with X. And so you come up with a list of 25 things to change. It's like, well, what happens if you just pick one and then you do it consistently? And consistently is not 100% of the time. Let's just get clear with that. It's not 100%.
Say that again.
Yes.
Say that again.
Consistency is not 100% of the time. And that's also where we set ourselves up for failure because we want that perfection. So you're going to miss a day. You're going to get sick, right? Something's going to happen with your family, but can you get back at it the next day? And that's where we have to close that gap between doing the thing, skipping the thing, and getting back to the thing.
This is a terrible question to ask, but what is the bare minimum of consistency, do you think?
Well, I think
is it inconsistency?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really depends on your goal, right? So it kind of goes back to whatever your goal is and whatever you're working towards. Different goals are going to require different levels of inputs. I do a lot of work with business owners, and I help a lot of service-based business owners grow their business. Then when you're in business, one of the biggest things that business owners don't do is focus on the business development or getting the referrals and having the new client conversations and driving the business forward. So that's a lot of times where we need to focus on consistency. And we probably need to do that more often than not. So if you're doing that one day a week, that may or may not be enough to grow your business to the level you want it to.
Yeah. I think this point you're making of when people slip up, they just tend to give up. I have done that. I've seen that. I have seen that a lot. For myself personally, it feels like there's always been an element of guilt of I didn't do it. It's almost like I don't want to feel guilty again. So let me just drop the whole thing, truly, which is so counterintuitive. And so if we do slip up, how do you kind of forgive yourself and get back
That's such a great question. And I love that phrase that you just came up with. When people slip up, they tend to give up, which is so true. So one thing I think about is tracking. So goal achievers, they tend to track their goals. And when you're not doing well or you're not doing the thing, you don't want to track. And so one thing I recommend is that you shift your perspective as it relates to tracking. We have to move away from shame and judgment and move towards perspective and understanding. So if you can look at tracking with a different lens, not that I did a good job or a bad job, but rather, what can I learn from this? So did you slip up because you didn't have a plan? Did you slip up because you tried and it was really hard? Did you slip up because life got really busy and you didn't carve out that time? I think one big challenge that a lot of women have as it relates to achieving their goals, it relates to boundaries and wanting to always pour in and give to other people. And they don't feel like they have the opportunity to give to themselves. And so there's some mindset work there. But if you can learn to embrace tracking, and this is going back to that plan, like, hey, what are you going to track? What's going to get you to your goal? And then recognize we have to move away from good or bad and move towards that perspective and understanding.
Okay, so how do we track? I'm a big gold star sticker on a chart girl, but how do you actually track?
Yeah, well, track that way if that works for you, right? That goes back to the reflection. And I didn't dive into a bunch of questions, but if you start reflecting on your goals and what helped you achieve your goals in the past, you can use that same strategy today. So I'll share with you an example. I used to be a marathon runner. Today, I'm much more of a yogi. That's way more my jam as I've gotten older. But when I would run marathons, when I was marathon training, I would post the night before a long run, like, I've got 18 miles to run tomorrow. And it wasn't that I was trying to be braggadocious, but that was my version of accountability. Even if no one cared, I still know, hey, I put that out into the social media universe that I have to get up and do the thing. So I know that because I studied my goals. I'm like, hey, what helped me cross that finish line? And going public is a really great way for me to achieve my goals. And so last year, I created my very first course. So I now have a course on my website called Goal Setting Success that fully details those 4 steps of effective goal setting we talked about earlier. And the only way I was able to do it is I went public on my own podcast with like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. And now I got to do the thing. So going back to tracking, it really is whatever is going to work for you. It could be an app. It could be pen and paper. It could be a poster board with gold stars. I don't think there's one magical way to track.
We talked at the beginning of this episode. Bhavana, I thought, had an interesting point. She said that she's able to do the things at work that other people ask her to do. I don't want to disappoint anyone else, but it's harder to stay true and faithful to the goals that we set for ourselves. So if we have these goals that we want to achieve and feel so important to us, why is it that sometimes we procrastinate or avoid them?
I'm curious, when you achieve a goal at work, what do you get out of achieving that goal?
I don't know. I guess I kind of think of it as like, this is just what I have to get done. I get recognition from my boss and like everybody like, oh, you're doing a great job. This looks good for like potential promotion. And we're glad we hired you. You clearly have it together. You're doing everything we need you to do. And just a feeling of like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and I'm doing it really well.
Okay. So I heard you say there's an element of recognition. It puts you on path to promotion. You get the sense and feeling that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're doing it really well.
Yeah.
What's then different with your personal goals?
Oh, so much. I feel like my 2 big goals right now, I was telling Erin around, consistent workout, which is not at all original. And then also creative time each week. I'm trying to write more consistently because when I do it, I'm like, oh, okay, I think I could be good at this. But to answer your question of what's different, there's probably an element of the confidence missing with those things and a little bit of, oh, I don't know if this is good or this isn't coming naturally. Why does it take me so long to put 100 words down? And then I read it and I'm like, is this good? And then with the gym stuff, I'm just like, is anything happening? Like, is like anything changing? It just feels like the results take longer. it doesn't feel as certain of like, oh, I'm doing this well. And there's no recognition unless I make my husband be like, good job.
Yeah.
Right. So, which I don't do as of now. Maybe I should start doing that. But I guess that's the difference.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for being brave and answering those questions, because we just learned a lot, right? We learned that you seem to be really driven to achieve goals when there's an element of recognition, when you have a chance of being told it's going really well, and you know what you're getting out of achieving that goal, promotion. When it comes to your personal goals, I'm hearing you say, gosh, it just doesn't feel as certain. It's not coming naturally. I don't know if I'm good at it. So we're missing the recognition, and there's no clear promotion at the end of it. You know, if you write 100 words a week, a day, whatever your goal is, we don't really know what that end goal is. And so that's some really interesting insight that we just learned about you. That might be why you're crushing the work goals, and the personal goals you're going to be crushing now in the future because you have this insight. The other thing too, I would encourage you to think about is, how are you defining success with your personal goals? So with working out, you're like, is it working? You know, it reminds me of those memes. Do you ever see those memes that are like, I ate a salad for lunch today. Have I lost like my weight yet? So have you thought about your definition for success? And if your definition for success is like a certain number on the scale, well, that might also be setting you up for failure, because that number is going to go up and that number is going to go down. And so is your definition of success, hey, you know, working out for me is I'm working out 3 days a week. And when I do that 3 days a week, I hit my goal. So there might be an opportunity for you to define how you are viewing success. And I think another mistake we make with tracking is we only track the output, or we only track the result, but we also need to track that input or the effort that we're putting in, because that's the leading indicator that's going to drive that ultimate result you're looking for.
And that's what we've heard so many times. We have to learn how to detach from the outcome. And it's like, I know you love writing so much. It's hard to turn off that judgy voice, but it's like, are we enjoying the writing part of it so much that it doesn't matter? We talked a little bit about this before, but if you are the ambitious person who thinks they can do all of the things, how do you know when it's too much? I have my full-time job. I want to do 2 podcasts. I also think that I have time to promote those things, have a social life, find a husband, and write a book, right? So it's like, those are so many things. There's only so many hours in the day, and we don't have a team. It's like, it's me, it's Bob's, or it's just me. So realistically, how can we decide what's actually doable and what we can actually do consistently? Because part of my thing is I'm so overly ambitious, and then I have to devote so much time to so many different projects. And then it just feels like I get burned out. So then I'm like, oh, I'll have a weekend off and I'll be social, but then the work piles up. So, you know what I'm saying?
All the things. How do we manage all the things? So one thought I have is, do we have to do all the things at the same time?
It feels like yes.
Erin's like, yes.
Yes. You got to do them all.
It feels like yes, because I have Bhavana here for this, but for the other projects, it feels like it's only me. So it's like, if I don't edit it, it's not going to get done. If I don't promote it, it's not going to get done. And I haven't written this book, but if I don't write it, it's not going to get done. And I need to work out. And if I don't hang out with people, then I'll have nothing in the tank. So it feels like yes.
Okay, good. I love how you said one thing, and I want to point this out. You said, I have to do this. So one is shifting our mindset to say, I get to do this. So instead of I have to, I get to. That's a huge mindset shift that brings the power back to you, and you get to remind yourself that you get to do these things. All right. How good are you at running a calendar?
I love a calendar. But I'm one of those people who's like slice their day up a million times in an Excel sheet of like, well, if I get up at 5 and then I write until 5:40 and then I go work out. So I love it, but
it can become the enemy.
Yeah, because someone said this to us. It's not assigning the minutes of your day, but how much energy do you actually have that you're going to be able to do all of these tasks?
Yeah. So if you're trying to do a lot of things, first of all, we have to use a calendar. If it's not on the calendar, it's just not going to happen. And so the other thing that I think is really important to think about is, when are you most energized? When are you least energized? Yes. And so when you think about all these things that you get to do and that you want to accomplish, well, some are going to require that most energized. And that's when we need to be working on those, where others might not require as much energy. And so we're working on those at other times. And then another concept is, I can't remember exactly where this came from, but if you think of a glass vase, all right, and here's what we're going to start to put in that glass vase. We have rocks, we have pebbles, we have sand, we have water. So we have a glass vase. We have to identify what are the rocks, and those go in that glass vase first. So those become those top level priorities. Then we have the pebbles, and then we fill in the pebbles in the vase. Then we have the sand, and we put the sand in the vase, and then we fill with the water. But if you start it with the water, that vase is going to be full. And if you go to put your rocks in, all the water is going to fall out. So some of this is really getting clear. Like, yeah, we can do a lot of things, but what are your rocks? What are your pebbles? What is your sand? And what is your water? Another way that I like to look at this is where in all those areas, you mentioned work, writing a book, 2 podcasts, working out, social time, husband, out of these 6 elements that are really important to you, where do you want to get an A? Where do you want to get a B? And where is it okay to get a C? Because I find that especially as overachievers, we're probably trying to excel in all 6 of those areas.
Yeah. I don't want a C+ husband. That's not
that one's got to be an A. we want an A plus husband, right? But and then that relieves that pressure. It's going back to the pressure. If you're like, okay, for now, I can do a grade C job on my writing because that's not at the top of the list. But when I, find my husband and my podcast is up and rocking, now that's going to shift and the writing is going to become that A.
How do you know if it's time to give up on a goal?
Yes, that's such a great question. And, as we're all talking about being achievers and we're super ambitious, the thought of giving up on a goal is like, no, I don't do that, right? Like I dig my high heels in and I keep going towards the goal. So I haven't had a chance to talk about another goal achievement best practice, and it's having very intentional goal check-ins. So I recommend that you check in with your goals. You do a month-end goal check-in and you do a quarterly goal review. And when you do these on the regular, so here we go back to our friend consistency, you're going to know really quickly if you're on track or off track for your goals. So there's no surprises. And it's sometimes when we're off track where we feel really inspired to give up on a goal. And this is where you have to ask yourself, is this goal still moving me in the direction of my vision and where I want to go? And if the answer is yes, we don't give up on the goal. We might change our strategies. We might try a different tactic. We might change the timeline, right? And maybe instead of us achieving it by the end of the year, we're like, hey, I'm going to do it by the end of next year, but we don't give up on the goal. But if during these reviews and reflections, you realize I'm growing as a person, I'm going in a different direction, this goal no longer supports that, great. Let's stop chasing that goal and rewrite a new goal that supports where it is that we want to go.
Thank you. That feels more doable than just giving up. Review and reflections. That's a little comforting.
Do you have anything to add, Kristen, about how we can be more consistent, the magic formula?
One other thing that I will add that we haven't talked about are these negative mental narratives, which are these stories that we start to tell ourselves. And you have to start to get really good at unpacking these stories. So there's a statistic, and I'm not going to get the numbers perfectly correct, but we have an overwhelming percentage of negative thoughts on any given day. Yeah. And so you start to become aware and mindful around how many of your thoughts are negative, because these negative thoughts, they're not inspiring consistency. They're often the ones that are going to be rooted in fear and comfort, want to hold you back. They're not going to help you be more confident or courageous. And so when you start having a lot of these negative thoughts, my 2 favorite power questions are, what's the worst that can happen? And what's the best that can happen? So what's the worst that can happen if you go all in on the podcast? Or what's the worst that can happen if you dedicate X amount of time to your writing every single week? And well, what's bad about that? What's bad about that? What's bad about that? But then you have to flip the script and ask yourself, well, what's the best that can happen? And what I have found is when you ask yourself those power questions, what's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? And you compare, the real fear lies in not going after the best case scenario.
Love that question. So thank you for that. Is there anything else you think our audience should know before we let you go?
So I want to teach your audience about the Friday ritual. So the Friday ritual is a practice that I started my very first year in business. I mentioned I started my business December 2019. And so I left my corporate role, and then we had the holidays. So it was really fun. I got to play business owner for a couple of weeks where I was like, I'm a business owner. But, we were celebrating holidays and traveling for New Year's. And so it's that first week in January. And I remember that I had a day and I was super excited because it was going to be a potential client. He canceled the meeting. And then there was another thing that got canceled on my calendar. And then even my girlfriend, we were going to have one of our goals calls. She had to cancel. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt just that wave of negativity. Like, what did I just do? I just left a 6-figure career to start my own business. And this is not going the way that I thought. I remember I went for a walk at that time, and I came back from that walk and I sent a request to have a referral meeting. And I was like, that is my bounce back plans. Anytime there's this negativity, doing one thing that's going to make you feel great. For me, it was working out, and then one action in the opposite direction that created that bounce back plan. And then at the end of the week, I just picked up my notebook and I started writing down what were my wins for the week? What did I learn for the week? And then what do I need to focus on next week? And that really is how the Friday ritual was born. It's so simple. At the end of your week, literally write down weekly wins, lessons learned, priorities for next week. And those priorities cannot be another laundry to-do list of all the things. We're really, really identifying 3 to 4 activities, initiatives, ideas that are going to move you in the direction of your goals. So maybe a priority is I'm going to write for 10 minutes. Maybe it doesn't have to be a full hour. Like, what happens in 10 minutes? Chances are it's like the gym. Once you get going, you just kind of keep going. But 10 minutes feels way less intimidating than an hour. But that Friday ritual, it grows your confidence, because when you focus on the wins, you're reminding yourself of all the good things that happened.
And what a great way to recognize your own self, Bhavs, and your own wins that get that recognition from you.
Yes.
I love it. That's such a good idea. Yeah. Thank you for that Friday ritual. We're going to try it out today.
I know. How appropriate that we would be discussing it today, Friday. Okay, so that was fantastic. There was so much energy. I just want to say thank you for the energy.
Thank you.
So for people who want more of the infectious energy, maybe they want to do your course or just find more of the wisdom that you have to share, how can people find you?
Thank you for that opportunity. You can find me on my website, which is KristenBurke.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Meet Kristen Burke, or you can listen to my podcast if you want some more infectious energy, which is Elite Achievement.
We love to share, Kristen, here at the end of our podcast, one thing or a couple things we're going to take away. So, Bhavs, what are you taking away from this chat today?
Yeah, a couple things. I think the slip up piece, like when you slip up, it's okay. It doesn't mean you have to give up. I had a tendency, I think, to be like, oh, you're lazy, you don't really want this. But now I'm seeing it's just a piece of like, okay, we just haven't built our confidence enough. We just need to party with fear a little bit. It's not a judgment on me, which feels good. And then the other piece is applying what makes me so good at goal achieving in some settings. How can I bring that to what I really want to do for myself? Whether that's recognition or something else that feels important to hack that.
Yeah.
What about you, Erin?
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. See, Kristen, this is why I love Bob so much. She's so thoughtful. She's so insightful. I, too, am going to take that consistency does not mean 100% of the time and not beat myself up if there is that time when I'm not able to do something. Mm-hmm. I also loved the what's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? Because like you, when you stare at that blank page, can I be doing something better with my time? Or no, the worst that can happen is I've wasted 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever I'm able to devote. And then the best that can happen is A+++ husband that I can see with the children on the beach while I'm tip typing from my, office with the ocean view. So that's what we're going to take away.
Awesome. Well, I don't know if you're going to ask me, but I'm going to share anyway. So
please.
After spending time with us, yes, please. What did you learn?
I learned a lot. One thing I learned is that it's really important to help people with the prioritization piece. I think that's probably something that I take for granted. Just as someone who's been talking about goals and doing this work for a really long time, I feel like that prioritization piece is something that's really, really significant and really important to uncover and talk about. And then also probably too, need to reinforce and remind people around the tracking. And I will borrow, if it's okay, when people slip up, they tend to give up. I think that was such like a brilliant phrase, and really helping give people permission that they're not giving up on themselves. Just because you miss a day doesn't mean that you're giving up on themselves. So thank you for teaching me that today.
Bob's is the best.
Oh, look, we taught somebody.
It's a most self-improved first.
Yeah.
Our gold star today, our recognition. Look at that recognition she gave us.
Yes.
So to everyone who tuned in, let us thank you for your consistency in joining us. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any episode, and be our friend on Instagram at most self-improved, all one word, so you can stay in touch on a consistent basis. And if you are rolling your eyes at how many times I've said consistent or making it a drinking game, at least I have been all together now, consistent. So to my other quick studies out there, we hope you have a great week.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.